Welcome to the next episode. It's your boy Dano. I'm live here in the Flintco Talks studio in Austin, Texas, and I'm happy to say that I have an award-winning author with us today, Miss Patti DeNucci. Hello, Patti. How are you this morning?
I'm great, Dan. How are you doing?
I'm doing really good, so I'm really glad to have you here today. Can you tell us just a little bit about who you are, kind of what you stand for, and about maybe a little bit about some of these books that are here on our table that you wrote and kind of what they're all about?
Sure. Well, today, well into my career, I am someone who teaches smart professionals how to converse and connect more authentically, more confidently, easily, graciously, so that their lives and jobs and entire environment can be better. So I work with all kinds of companies, big companies like Microsoft, little companies that you've never heard of. I have the two books, The Intentional Networker and More Than Just Talk, which just came out this year. Mm-hmm. Both of them are award winners, which couldn't make me happier.
Yay, that's awesome.
Anytime you're a writer and you get a literary award, you feel like you're legitimate. But I have a background in marketing communication, so I've been a communicator all my life.
Awesome. It's really great to have, like we said, the acclaimed author. I love looking and seeing the little seals on here, the silver winner and the gold winner. So really appreciate you taking some time to sit down with us today. As we've been through the Flintco Talks over the last couple episodes, we've been talking a little bit about mental health. We've been talking about how to create community on a job site where construction really loves to chew up people and spit them out. It's full of type A type people that don't like to share their problems. They don't like to talk about what's going on in their lives. You know, when you walk in and you say, hey, good morning, did you have a good weekend? Everybody kind of gives you the, yeah, it's great. You know, and if you're not able to clearly communicate, if you're not able to really have good conversation with the people that you work with, it makes it much harder to have that spirit of community. Would you agree?
Oh, absolutely. That's why I do what I do. And it's not just construction, it's all kinds of industries. It can be high tech, it can be healthcare, it can be education. We all feel like we need to just bring our professional selves to work, and not to say that we should bring every part of ourselves to work, because frankly that would be too much. But yes, we need to learn how to start being connected again, because that's what builds relationships. It's what helps us give each other more slack when things aren't going well, more patience, more forgiveness. And it also helps build community and culture within an organization, and that's a big thing right now.
So tell me a little bit about how this became your passion. Like, how did you get into this, right? Because, well, go ahead, answer that question first.
Oh my.
I got a follow-up coming.
You ask great questions, though, Dan, I have to say. That's a wonderful art. Well, I realized way back, I'll make this part short, way back, my grandfather and dad started a auto dealership in a small town in northern Minnesota, and my grandfather founded it in 1933, which, of those of you who know history know that was in the middle of the Great Depression.
Yeah, tough time.
And they literally built that business one conversation at a time by being part of the community, by being good to people, no matter where they came from, what country they came from, or any of that. And I grew up in that, not realizing that that would become a very big influence on what I do now. And, you know, I will say every great thing that's ever happened to me happened because I had a conversation with somebody, maybe somebody who was introduced to me, maybe an opportunity like a job interview possibility, but also I've had random conversations in grocery stores, bars, coffee shops that have led to something that changed my world or the world of somebody I loved. So being able to connect to other people is just a very basic human skill. I
think about, first of all, great story about your grandfather. That's really cool, especially in the middle of the Depression and making that work and being able to sell cars and be able to deliver just based on probably the person he was, right?
That's exactly it. That's exactly it. People had no money. They didn't, a car, that was like buying, you know, something super high tech right now.
Mm-hmm. Buying a spaceship today.
Yeah, buying a spaceship. That was it.
So I think about having good conversation. I think about talking to youth. Right, I'm super involved at our church, and I'm one of the youth group sponsors for our middle and high school kids. And when we get to youth group on Sunday night, the first thing we do is like, hey, take your phone and let's put it in this bucket outside, right? Your phone's not going to be in your pocket. Your phone's not going to be in your face while we're here and we're learning about Jesus and sharing with each other. How do you think phones have played into the ability to not converse well?
Don't even get me started. This is a big one. No, I'm kidding. No, and I'm glad that you're doing that, because the generation now is a generation that grew up with phones, with laptops, with screens, and we've literally become addicted to them. They give us dopamine hits. And interestingly, human contact also gives us a little bit of a hit, but it's not well, it could be dopamine, but it's oxytocin, which is the tend and befriend hormone. And we're missing out on giving our kids opportunities to connect with each other. Someone I know said the other day, you know, I feel like when I'm driving my son to and from soccer practice, he's on his phone the whole time, and I feel like I'm missing out on an opportunity for us to be connected to each other. And I said, you absolutely are. So it's up to you to lay the ground rules on that. When does the phone come out, and when does it not come out?
Yeah, and when is it okay to have it out, right? When you're trying to find something to eat or directions to the restaurant.
Yeah, it's an amazing tool. I mean, literally, everybody knows this. I think we can hold in our hands a computer that's more powerful than what they used to go to the moon in 1969.
Yeah.
It's an amazing device.
It really is. It really is. So while that is kind of a barrier for kind of the newer generation, like how do we begin to have better conversations? Like even not specifically with youth, but just in general, like what is the ground rules? What is the groundwork to have a really good conversation with somebody?
Well, I think you have to care. You have to have some caring. You have to have curiosity. You have to have some courage. You have to be attentive, be focused, not be multitasking. A friend of mine who works with companies fixed a community culture within an organization by telling the boss to simply stop what she was doing and look people in the eye when they came into her office. The moment someone came into her office, she was to stop working, to look at them, call them by name, welcome them in, and ask them what's on their mind. And that shifted an entire company culture just by doing that. So you have to be very intentional about it, very purposeful, and you have to build awareness. That's the first thing I tell people, is start being aware of your own conversation or non-conversation habits, and see where are you missing these pieces of, you know, put away what you're doing and stop and listen. Ask questions. I'm sure you've had some experiences where you had conversations that shifted something you were doing or impacted Flintco.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm trying to think of, you know, a good example for that. But the words that you said about caring, curiosity, courage, building awareness, those aren't things I typically think of when I have a conversation, right? I'm a big extrovert. I can have a conversation with, you know, this nice little plant here on our table, right? If I needed to, I could keep it busy for an hour if we needed to, but those aren't things that I typically think of, right? It's
probably because they come naturally to you.
Could be.
You had good role models in your family. I had good role models. I realize now that not everybody had the benefit that I had. I had a dad who was very gregarious and out in the community all the time. I had a mom who was more of an introvert, but she was so kind and gracious to even my sketchy boyfriends who came to the house.
Well, I would say the same way. I had parents that were the same way. My dad's outgoing one, my mom's the introvert. And life lessons, right? Thinking about these 3 C words, caring, curiosity, and courage, those were things that mom and dad weren't afraid to sit me down and say, hey, look, son, you know, we were 17 one time. We remember what it was like, and having those conversations that I can still reflect on now that means something to me, and that I still carry some of those nuggets with me around and share that with my kids and share it with...
Yeah, it's a great example of how a conversation can change your life.
Right. Why is it hard for us to not try to multitask when we're talking to somebody? You're saying no multitasking as I'm writing down notes over here.
That's a big one, and I'm guilty of it. I'm guilty of all the mistakes that people make. That's why part of what I do is I try to get better at it every time, and I have to reread my books. It's so time for me to reread my books. But tell me the question one more time, because I got myself sidetracked there.
No, it's really
not multitasking.
Yeah, not multitasking, right? Because you're sitting at your desk, you're typing. This is me. This is a Dano moment. I'm sitting at the desk typing, totally focused on what I'm doing, and somebody walks in and they're standing here and they're like, hey, Dano, can you help me? I'm like, oh, absolutely. What can I do for you? You know, they begin talking, and then I'm like, hey, hold on. So what would, you know,
you catch yourself.
Yeah.
What did you catch yourself?
Yeah. Or say, hey, what did you say? Right. Because I've been in situations when you go in to talk to somebody and you're like really nervous about it.
Sure.
You're going, hey, this is a conversation that's going to be critical. It's going to be crucial, whether it's building my career, whether it's the next step I want to take in my career. And you go into somebody's office and they're maybe they're not paying attention to you. It's like, oh my gosh, how am I going to have this conversation? And you're kind of like,
and how does that feel?
Yeah,
it feels terrible, doesn't it, when someone's not giving you their full attention? You know, kids, imagine kids who are trying to talk to their parents and asking them a question. You know, sometimes kids can be annoying, but sometimes they have pretty legitimate questions. And you're still typing away. And I think it's because we're so busy. We have created such a busy life for ourselves. In construction, you have deadlines. You have a lot of moving parts. You have a lot of money on the line. And you want to do things perfectly. So, and that's, you know, I think a lot of industries are like that. But I think we have to learn that we can't multitasking is not effective. It is so sabotaging to so many things, to our own attention. I've learned that even now that we have smartphones, I feel like I have more ADD now than I had when I was younger.
Yeah, exactly.
I just want everything to be happening to me all at once. And so we have to slow down. Slowing down is a big one too. Slowing down, focusing on the person, looking at them in the eye, not in a creepy way, in a friendly way, in a warm way. And that makes people feel so much more respected and honored and heard. Being heard is just an amazing feeling. It literally lights up the same part of your brain that if you took a big bite of cheesecake or a steak or you know, your favorite whatever, the same part of your brain lights up when you're heard.
My brain just lit up when I was thinking about cheesecake, this creme brulee cheesecake I had over.
Do we have any cheesecake
Yeah, exactly. Is there something close? Yeah, no, we just have this plant here. But also something you said earlier was about authentic, right? And that kind of ties in with what you were just talking about. Like if you're looking at somebody and you have eye contact and you're really paying attention to what they're saying, like I find myself maybe listening to respond sometimes and not listening to understand, right?
That's so common.
That's something you see a lot of?
Well, it's natural because your brain is automatically processing what you're hearing. Well, first of all, let's talk about listening for a minute. Listening requires more brain power because there's all this stuff going on in your own head already, which if you're like me, it's packed up there with everything. Yeah. And then the person's talking to you and telling you something, and you're adding that to the mix, and then you feel like you should respond because we are having an interaction. And there are times when we have to put a hold button, hit the pause button, whatever it is, on the need to respond, or even say something like, if like your kids or someone you love is coming to you, or a coworker is coming to you with a problem, you might even say, are you wanting me to just listen, or do you want me to help you, give you some advice on this? What kind of a conversation are we having here? And sometimes if you clarify that, they may say, you know, I just need to vent right now. And then if you have any ideas, let's hear that. But I need to just get this all out before I forget what I'm going to say.
That's incredible. I've never thought of it like that. If somebody comes to you and they begin venting, I'm a fixer, right?
Yeah, me
That's
too.
why I love construction, right? It's about problem solving. Whenever you turn around, there's another problem and the situation's changed, and hey, what can you do to fix the problem? So I love the thought of, do you want me to help you? Right? Because if you're here and you're telling me all these things about what's going on at soccer practice or what's going on the job site, or even the conversation you had with your significant other last night or your office mate, the first thing I'm thinking is, if I'm in this situation, how am I going to fix it? Right? And sometimes people don't want a fix, right?
They don't want to fix, and sometimes we need to empower them to fix it themselves. You might even respond with, so what are you going to do about this? And hear what they're going to say, and then you can have the conversation of, well, maybe that might work, but here's 3 other ideas you might also consider before you make the decision on that. There's an entire chapter, probably even a section, in my More Than Just Talk book about different ways to listen to people, and listening is the #1 conversation skill. And we don't do it near enough. 6th graders are better listeners than we are.
Not the ones in my youth group. No, I'm just saying.
Oh, yeah,
Maybe
they are.
So. But it's back to this curiosity thing. When somebody's here and they're telling me what the issue is, I'm curious of how to fix it. But I love the idea of just saying, or validating what's going on in their life, or validating, like, man, that must be really tough for you. Like, I'm really sorry that you're going through that, or I'm really sorry that this person was rude to you, or that you got cut from the soccer team, whatever it is. And sometimes that's when you're in a tough spot and you're venting to somebody. A lot of the times you really don't want to fix. Like you said, you just want to get it off your chest and be like, hey, this is getting out of here. So one of the things I wanted to try to talk about today is really how to have better conversations, how to create those better conversations, how to have a community where those conversations can happen where you've created rapport with your people, where you've created rapport with maybe even the owners or trade partners on our jobs, that kind of stuff, and how to have those conversations to help build those relationships so you can see these things like authenticity. You can see the grace offered to people. You can participate with each other with patience, have a little room to step on each other's toes, have a little room to offer some forgiveness because you've created a relationship there.
Yeah. So are you asking how to do it?
Well, I think that's kind of like maybe we kind of start and walk down that road, and maybe we can talk about some examples of where we've seen a great community and maybe what created that community, which allowed that grace, which allowed the patience and allowed the forgiveness with each other to overcome what could be a challenging job, what could just be a big problem that you're dealing with maybe in your personal life. But what would a better conversation look like if we were going to write down several things? It's like, hey, what does a better conversation look like for us so people that are listening can say, I understand that.
I can take those steps.
I can take those steps, and they're actionable, and it's really something that, hey, if I just write down a few notes while I'm listening to this, I can practice this the next time somebody comes in my office, or the next time I'm talking to the owner, or the next time I'm talking to my favorite trade partner.
Absolutely. Well, I think the very first step is making the choice that you're going to do that. Putting that as part of the company vision, part of the company objective, the company philosophy is we are going to make sure that we have solid in-person relationships. I mean, relationships and conversations in person are more powerful than the ones on the phone, which are more powerful than the ones by email, which are more powerful than the ones by text. And I think I know by how much my phone is ringing, how many companies need their client-facing and vendor-facing people to get off their computers and get out into the world. Like when you have to tell your employees, like, please go take your client to lunch, nobody had to tell me that.
Right.
My boss handed me a credit card and I knew what to do at that point.
Right.
Yeah, but that was years ago. And so making the choice to do that and getting your skills in order, a lot of people say, well, I'm just not a people person. I'm not social. Granted, there are introverts whose batteries are drained more by social contact than we extroverts. Actually, I'm an ambivert. I'm half and half. So I come to this with sympathy for and praise for both sides. Understanding that shyness and social awkwardness just means that it's like me and push-ups. I'm terrible with push-ups. I'll always be terrible with push-ups until I start practicing doing them more. Yep. So when people say, I'm just not a people person, I don't buy that. I tell them there are skills you can learn. So the choice, building your skills, and then making some goals on, I will make sure that I will get on the phone with the people I need to talk to however many times a week. I will take that person to lunch. I will invite them to my home. I mean, I don't know how deep you want to get into this. I know we'll go golfing, we'll go play tennis. Make an effort to build a relationship. Literally, that was how my dad and grandfather built a business. And they outpaced some of the bigger, flashier dealers in the area because they were kind of homey. It was pretty homespun. But my dad, everybody knew my dad. People still, when I post a picture of my dad, my classmates from high school still say, I loved your dad. He was so fair. He was such a good businessman. And people loved him, but he was out in the community. When I'd go to work for him, he'd be out at the bakery most of the morning having coffee and donuts with the locals. So
creating that connection.
A big piece of advice that I got that relates to that I actually got from one of my mentors who's president of a university here in Austin. He said, work doesn't always happen at your desk. Wow, yeah. And that's a big one. It doesn't always happen at your desk. So it means, not only building relationships outside the company, build solid relationships inside your company too. You guys are a team. You're trying to, you have common goals. So build those relationships. Have meetings. Here's one idea, 4 on Friday. It's an idea that a lot of companies that I talk to have put into place where you'd have a place in the lunchroom, break room, where you pick names out of a hat, and on Friday, random 4 of you go to lunch, and that's how you get to know each other. So you're not hanging around with the same people all the time.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
4 on Friday.
To just get you out, get you to be able to meet folks. Why do you think sometimes it's hard to have those conversations? Like, why would we have to force ourselves to do the 4 on Friday? Like, is it human nature? Maybe for introverts to not want to. You said about drained batteries. Extroverts always feel like I've got energy to do some of that. So
that's really an interesting question. You know, I can only speak for myself and for people that I've worked with. I think sometimes there's this fear of that I'm going to say the wrong thing, or I'm going to screw this up, or I don't have time. I have other things are more important. We don't make it a priority. I think we're afraid we're going to get into the world is kind of contentious right now. People are living at the extremes, and there are plenty of ways to deal with that for sure, which we could get into or not. I definitely deal with those in my second book, More Than Just Talk. But I think there's just a fear of I'm going to say the wrong thing. And here's a little 3 words that can help with that. One is assume positive rapport. And that means you're going into a conversation or a relationship assuming that people are going to like you, because more than likely they will. It takes a lot for people to not like you right off the bat.
Yeah.
I mean,
No,
honestly, unless you're doing something really bizarre and really odd and strange, people are going to like you. And imagine going into a conversation with that attitude versus going into a conversation feeling nervous and anxious. The other person can pick up on that energy.
real quick.
Real quick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that, assume positive rapport. I was trying to think of an example where we had good rapport, like on a job, and something comes to mind. Like one of the projects we did starting in the fall of 2013 was at UT at Chilling Station 7. And we had a group of workers, an office staff, that allowed each other grace, that encouraged patience and encouraged forgiveness. And I think of the guys that were on that job, guys like Charlie Brackman that's up in our Denver office now. His big brother was even on that job. Have you ever been on a job with brothers and they actually were able to get along? It was really powerful. It was for all of us to do that. I remember Brant Birkeland was on that job, and what was so special about that job was the people on that job. Me and a couple other guys had recruited from Texas A&M, right? Guys that we saw hard work ethic in, folks that could be a part of a high performing team. And once we kind of got together all on the same job, we sat down and we had the conversation about expectations. Like, hey, how are we going to treat each other, right? Because we knew each other, because I had established relationships with them while recruiting them from college to an internship, working for Flintco for several years, and then being able to be on the same job together. And we had that conversation. While it was a little awkward, while it tried to be authentic, there was some joking, but at the end, we got to the point where it's like, hey, we realize it's going to take us all. We're all type A people, right? We're all pushers. That's why we're high performers in the construction industry. But we were able to sit down and talk about how are we going to treat each other, what it's going to be like when we have a meeting or when there's a disagreement. You know, and we created this conditions of satisfaction. And it was posted in my office about how we were going to deal with each other. And sometimes it would get heated. It's like, hey, let's go in here and read the conditions of satisfaction one more time.
That is great.
Let's get ourselves grounded, right? Let's take a step back, take a deep breath, step back from the edge. Let's go in here, let's read this again, and let's, really have a conversation. And that job we were able to deliver on time, under budget. We gave money back to the owner on that job.
Wow.
They were super excited to get an extra $100,000 back in the kitty, but it ended up being a successful job for all of us. Everybody on that job got a promotion at some point.
That's great. But see, that's what winning teams do. Winning teams decide. Like I said earlier, choice. You're making the choice. You're setting the standard. You're deciding. You're being intentional on and purposeful on how we're going to do that. And, families working together, I grew up in that. Oh, my dad and my grandfather, they had their moments, but, it didn't get dramatic. My son works with his dad and his cousin, and they make the choice that they're going to get into it with each other at times, but they're going to love each other. And choosing to love each other, using the word love, as grace, be gracious. I mean, having a deep respect for each other means that you're going to have to talk about things. And when you have those really awful days when you're just so mad at each other, you have to draw it back in and remember why you work together, and apologize if necessary. But everybody's in the same boat. They all know it's going to be tough. So that grace, that's the word, grace.
Yeah, absolutely.
And humility, I think, not admit, you don't have to say you're wrong all the time, but being no more than, but no less than who you're supposed to be in the relationship and in the company and in conversation.
Well, I think there's power in that also, right?
It's so powerful.
And those of y'all that are looking for a New Year's resolution, make the choice, right? I love that.
Make the choice.
Make the choice. Hey, we're going to be better. And by being a little vulnerable sometimes and being able to be humble, like I said, there's power in that when you can come to somebody and say, hey, look, I was wrong.
Yeah.
You were right. That was a better idea. And we're going to be better because of it, right? We're not going to make that mistake again. We're all going to take a minute. We're going to see what we could have done better. The after action report, we like to call it. And then and diagnose the problem and move on and get past it.
I mean, what's the point of saving the planet if we don't have humanity anymore?
That's
we're
exactly
literally saving humanity when we start to make the choice to talk to each other. And people are getting so isolated, and it wasn't just the pandemic thing. It's been going on for the last 20 years, and I think technology was a huge piece of that. Huge piece. And technology is wonderful, don't get me wrong. It makes my life a whole lot easier, but we have to remember how to use it and when not to use it, and when to have a face-to-face. When is it time, even when, things don't have to be bad to have a face-to-face.
No,
you have
not
to build
at all.
up some good memories too.
No, that's exactly right. I remember having a conversation one time with one of our higher-ups years ago that was kind of like, dude, every time you show up, somebody's getting fired. Like you've got to come to the job site more often than with 2 checks that's telling somebody, hey, thanks for your service and you're moving on, right? Because when they would show up, everybody's kind of looking around. They're like, oh my gosh, who's going to get the axe today? Why is this person here? What's going on?
And that builds the fear. That builds the fear.
It really does. And I like what you said. It builds rapport amongst the team also, to spend time with your team members, not scolding them for something they did or not course correcting for a mistake they made. That's just kind of like, hey, let's go to lunch today. And we're going to go to lunch and let's just hang out. We're not going to talk about work. We're not going to talk about the owner's meeting that just bombed. We're going to talk about, what are you doing this weekend?
Yeah, so that brings us to the power of great questions. And you can make the choice there too, to develop questions that you can use with your colleagues, with your peers, with anybody that you work with or want to build a relationship with. Come up with questions that will get to those deeper levels of beyond the small talk, beyond the weather, beyond the latest sports scores, beyond the news, beyond inflation, latest stock prices. I mean, ask each other questions like, who was your favorite teacher growing up, and how did they influence, or coach, or person, mentor? Who's influenced you the most? There are all kinds of questions. There's plenty of questions in the back of my book, more than just talk, organized by setting, where you can start getting into a deeper conversation. And then I love developing zingers. Like I could, if we had a whole nother show, I could say, Dan, who's on your construction Mount Rushmore?
Oh my gosh.
See, we could sit and talk for an hour about that.
At least.
Yeah.
I love that, because the next thing I was going to ask you is like, what do better conversations look like? I love the thought of developing questions, right? And I've been through, business development trainings, and when you go to events, like what are questions you can ask people? But
you can even decide, there's 3 questions I'm going to ask everybody. And you can even say, you know what? I'm trying to get warmed up here socially, and I want to get to know you pretty quickly and not get stuck in that small talk rut that we often get stuck in. So I have 3 questions I'm asking everybody I'm talking to at this conference. It could be, you could have like a pretty easy one, like, what's your favorite, what book is on your nightstand? What's your favorite Netflix series? You can move into something a little deeper, like who are your mentors and why have they impacted you? What are you trying to accomplish this year? I'm just, spitballing here basically, but that's what I do when I'm out in social situations now, because when I ask the question, it takes the pressure, somehow it releases the pressure. Like I can sit and listen to something interesting, and I'll probably learn something, and I'll probably be inspired by somebody.
And that's what creates the memory. So they remember who you are, right?
And the bond.
Yeah, exactly. And if you recall that the next time you see them, you're like, oh yeah, when we talked last time, you were telling me about your 4th grade teacher and how they impacted you. Or
it's how you remember people. Like when I get business cards from people, and I know not everybody uses business cards anymore, but I'm still a big fan of business cards, because you can take a few notes and write on the back. And I literally went through the thousands of business cards that I have collected over the years, and I made notes on the back. Where did I meet them? What did we talk about? And the ones where I can really remember the conversation, I kept those. It may not be anybody that I may never see that person again, but just the memory of that is really precious to me.
And I think that's a great pointer about how you can have a better conversation, is have some questions that are more than, hey, did you catch the Cowboys game this weekend?
Yeah.
Or,
you can start there.
Yeah, totally.
You can definitely start there.
You could definitely start there. But if it's a new conversation with somebody, or you're at an event, or you're at you know, some kind of conference or something like that. I like the idea of having questions to find out who people are, right? And they're going to remember you for the questions you ask, and not really you lamenting about whoever missed the playoffs or whatever. Bill Belichick got let go by the Patriots, and how could they let him go after 24 seasons, whatever it might be.
Whatever it is. And, you know, here's a big thing. We are responsible for our socialization. That's something that people think that there's somebody else. I don't know who they even think it's whose responsibility it is, but they don't put it on themselves. And business etiquette, social etiquette says you need to take charge. You need to go introduce yourself. You need to start the conversation. You need to show interest in other people. And if you're waiting for somebody else to do it, you're probably going to keep sinking down into the awkward conversation.
So when you say like to take that initiative, that's probably back to like making the choice yourself.
Making the choice.
And taking that initiative. Like, what does that look like for somebody? Like, because everybody doesn't have a bubbly personality. Everybody doesn't have the ability to talk to anybody about anything. Like, what kind of advice could you give for people that are trying to form a relationship, that struggle with it, that like to come to an event and kind of hang out on the side until they see somebody they know, and then they go latch onto them and they spend the whole day with them? Like, what are some pointers that you could tell us to, this is a great opening line, this is a great start? How can you help us?
There's 2 books right there to your right that would be great. It's start learning. Look for learning opportunities. If in your company you feel like your whole company community is not as social as it could be, you know, go to HR, go to the powers that be and say, can we have lunch together? Can we have 6 or 8 of us sit and have lunch together where we can practice here and call it a safe space and bring in some people for lunch and learns, bring in some people to help us learn how to break the ice with each other. Because if you start in a safe space, then you can move on and practice out in the wild, they like to say. When my boyfriend and I take dance classes, we have the classes and they say, now go practice out in the wild. And it's like, well, that's terrifying.
Because you're going to be judged, right? Somebody's going to look at you and go, they're not doing it right.
Yeah, I don't care anymore. I'm at the age I don't care.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
No, I like that about looking for the learning opportunities and having the safe space. Yeah,
and just admit, you know, I have trouble with this. Like, ask people, what's your best tip for breaking the ice? People love to give advice. They do love to give advice.
Yeah, I think about that. That's something that I've told my engineers and folks that have worked for me, direct reports that have worked for me over the years, is there's not a person in the construction industry that doesn't want to share wisdom and knowledge about their trade and what they do. Like, if you want to get to know the foreman of the electrical company, go out and ask him. Walk in. The guy that's the foreman on my job now, DeMarcus, go in and ask DeMarcus, hey man, show me what you're doing here. Yeah. And he's going to go, oh my gosh,
he's so proud to do that.
Yeah, let me show you. This is why they call it a home run. This is the raceway. This is the wire. This is the conductor. This is the size. And all of a sudden, you're going to get an education and boom, a relationship.
And understanding on how complicated it is. Electrical stuff is hard. I mean, there's a lot of difficult things involved in construction. there really are. Or asking them, what's your story? How did you get here?
Or why did you choose electrical work, or why did you choose mechanical work? What is it about that? And I think it's kind of the same thing, just like we talked when we first started. It's like, hey, why did you get into this? You know, how to have these good conversations, right? Or you think people ask me, why'd you get into construction? It's like, you know, how long do you have, right? It started in 6th grade.
Where do we want to start? Start. But people love to tell their story. Most people do. Some people are very, very introverted and shy and really don't like talking to themselves. But if you show genuine interest, I think they will. And it's not to be snoopy. It's not to interrogate. It's like, I'm genuinely interested. I want to understand. Help me understand.
It's that curiosity we talked about.
Curiosity and caring.
And a little bit of courage also it takes to maybe ask the question. So you mentioned introverts sometimes that clam up when you talk to them. Like, what's a good way to be able to kind of break the ice with them? If you ask them, hey, tell me your story, and they're like, I was born and now I'm here. You know, how do you
that's on them. That's on them.
But what's a way, you know, if it's somebody that's going to be on your job, like I think about from a standpoint of starting a project, when we get trade partners out for the first time, we have this pre-construction meeting. They come to the trailer, they sit down, we introduce ourselves, we tell some funny stories, we talk about what they're going to do, and then we go out and we kind of walk the job and kind of scope out where they're going to be, when they need to start, what does the job need to look like when they get here. But you got somebody that shows up and is, you know, somebody that clams up on you. Like, what is a way to try to help bring somebody out of their shell like that? Do you have any kind of advice for that?
I think you have to do your best to make them feel comfortable, to make them trust you. And by that, it means not getting too deep too fast. Maybe asking them some of their favorite things, like who was your favorite football? Who should I never mention when it comes to football? Who should I mention? Learning about them in ways that are respectful. You can say something like, tell me what's the best way we can get to know each other. Maybe they need to go have a beer. Maybe they're a coffee person. I don't know. Breakfast tacos. What's their love language? And literally ask them, what's the best way we can get to know each other? Do you like to play golf? Some people prefer to get to know each other doing an activity together. And some people just aren't as comfortable sharing. And I think we have to honor that. But I think as long as we have respect and as long as we have grace and that we care about the people we work with and that we care about the end result, I think some of that does happen over time. Some people, as you know, I think you and I got to know each other pretty quickly because our personalities are similar.
Right,
and
absolutely.
We feel good about sharing and telling our stories, and that gives you context to talk about more things.
I like the question about what's the best way to get to know each other. Right, and that's not something I would think of. When somebody clams up, I'm just kind of like, okay, I'm just going to leave them be. Right, they don't want to talk. They don't want to be a part of what's going on. But I think it's a good icebreaker also, and it's a good way to really to get to know somebody a little bit more. Right, it's a little bit of that curiosity. Hey, tell me what makes you tick. Right.
What makes you tick? That's a great one.
Yeah.
What makes you tick? What are some of your favorite things? Like, if we were going to celebrate on a Friday, what do you like to go do? Do you want to go have the best sandwich ever at, whatever place has the best sandwich ever, or do you want to, what would you like to, how can we make this work together? I want this to be a positive relationship.
Absolutely. I really like that thought.
Yeah. And that works internally too. Building your own internal, conversations lead to connections build community, and community builds culture. And there's choices all along the way on what are those going to be? What are they going to sound like, look like? What's great going to look like? And all of it, whether it's a one-on-one relationship or the entire culture of a company or an organization or a school or a city.
Yeah, and I want to go back to make the choice again. And I would challenge the people that are listening to think about making the choice. What does making the choice look like for you? Is it asking deeper questions? Is it being more welcoming? Is it allowing the grace, allowing the forgiveness, right? Because that's hard, right? It's hard for type A people to be able to do that, to be able to come back and say, hey, what I said was wrong.
I was wrong. Those are the 3 words everybody loves to hear.
Yeah, exactly. And you say, hey, I was wrong, or hey, look, it's okay that this happened, or it's okay that we failed here, but we're going to learn from it. So I think for me, when I think about making the choice, I'm going to think about some of these questions. You said, about come up with your questions that you're going to ask people. The next event. Yeah, the next event I go to, I'm going to say, hey, I read in one of your blogs about if you had $100,000 and didn't have to go to work for the next 3 weeks, what would you do? And I've thought about how I'd answer that question, honestly, for probably the last 3 or 4 weeks. And I still don't know what I would do other than play golf and go to a beach somewhere.
Maybe that was a distraction, sorry.
No, it's totally okay.
But isn't it fun to think about? And it's fun to talk about. And you get to know people that way.
Yeah, and I actually used it over the break here a couple weeks ago, sitting around with some family and that kind of stuff. I kind of brought it up, and everybody was kind of like,
whoa.
Yeah, what would I do? Of course, my mom and dad, they're like, hey, we're retired. We do what we want to do anyway.
Right.
But, hearing from my brother, sister-in-law, that kind of stuff, it's always funny to think about that.
I can't say that I've developed these, but that's not to say I won't develop one at some point. But you can buy on Amazon or wherever you want to buy things, cubes that have table topics for couples, for families. I gave those to all our kids this year. We've sat with each other, my boyfriend and I, we've sat with our kids and gone through and some of the questions like, oh no, I'm not answering that one. That's too personal. I'm going to go in the back and I'm not talking about that in front of my kids. But developing and collecting those questions, you can even do it as an organization. Like, what questions do we ask at lunch? Go around and ask every employee in this organization or everybody we work with. Here's a question we're going to ask everybody so that you understand their story. Do you remember the movie shoot, now I'm drawing a blank. The one with Denzel Washington's the coach.
Remember the Titans?
That's it. Remember the Titans, and everybody's at odds with each other because they blended two teams, and there's some racial tensions and all of that, and competition and posturing and all that. And he tells everybody at summer training, you're all going to spend a little bit of time with every single person on this team. And then, you know, I don't have to even talk about how it ends because the movie's ancient.
Yeah, no,
it's a great example, and it's how teams win. It's how teams win.
Yeah, I like the idea. We have one of those little cubes on our dinner table, and kind of like when we got it out the first time, my wife's like, hey, we're going to ask these questions, and the kids are like, I can't believe we're going to do this.
Make them do it.
Right, but then they learn stuff about us, you know, questions that maybe they haven't asked us. And so I feel like as supervisors in our business, in the construction business, there's a responsibility to our employees and our direct reports to know them. Right.
Well, and questions of all kinds are important. You ask questions to find out what's going on in the job. You ask questions to get to know somebody. You ask questions to solve a problem. You know, before you go to bed at night, ask yourself a question about a problem you're having. And Thomas Edison was a great believer that if he asked himself a question before bed, he'd wake up with an answer, because your subconscious is churning away while you're hopefully sleeping. Or maybe your conscious is churning away on it too, because mine does that all the time.
Yeah. And then you wake up in the morning with the answer. I might have to try that too.
Questions are powerful. I use a lot of questions in my presentation. My presentations aren't presentations. They're inquiries. They're inquiries into getting people talking about what they're feeling and what they need to know. And questions help people talk to each other. So it's super powerful. The choice, the question, there's so many good words that go together to create great connections with each other.
For sure. And I think it's also having questions that aren't yes and no answers, right?
Absolutely.
Right. There's nothing worse than coming and asking somebody like, hey, did you have a good weekend? Yep. Sweet.
Or even when you ask, how's it going? Oh, it's going. Yeah. So learning how to do that, learning how to get deeper. I did some journalism work in college and fresh out of college, and the art of the question is the art of the story. That was the first thing I learned. And it's still serving me. Yeah.
I think that's going to also be part of my choice this year, is to make sure that I'm asking those questions to my direct reports or to those that I work with, just to make sure the relationship's there, right? Because back to the mental health thing, like you've got to create that community, right? So your people, if there's something going on in their life, you can pick up on it by whatever question you ask. Based on the answer that's coming back, you can pick up on it. You can start seeing some leading indicators that, hey, maybe something's going on with them, and maybe it's time to say, hey, let's go to lunch and let's talk. You know, and I can see what's up. I can see something's going on. You know, can you let me in a little bit, and let's see how I can help you, right? How can I help you in this situation?
You could even ask a question like, if something could be better in what we're doing right now, big or small, what would that be? And you have to be ready for the answer, of course, because it could be something just a little easy to fix, or it could be something that's you're gonna have to dig a little deeper, and it might create some work, but it might help you reveal something that no one's talking about. I know organizations that have a weekly meeting where they allow everybody to come in, and the questions are, what's going great, what could we be doing better, and what else do you have to tell me? And it's not meant to be a witch hunt scenario. It's meant to be kind of just a way of finding out what's really going on in this organization. And you know, when you can really find out what's going on in an organization, the organization is going to run better. And if it's running better, your employees are going to be happier, and certainly your clients and everybody else you work with will be happier also.
Yeah, I love the question, if something could be better, what would it be? We did a study, oh gosh, it was probably 14 or 15 years ago, where we watched a video, and the premise behind it was water is hot at 211 degrees, but at 212 it boils and produces steam, which is enough to, you know, move a steam turbine or a steam engine or whatever it was. And so we went back and did an activity at all of our job sites. We watched this little video, 212, and I remember asking the guys that were on my job sites, like, hey, what could we be doing better? What temperature are we operating at today?
Oh, right? That's brilliant. I love that. And I love that.
It was a little embarrassing, some of the numbers that came back, because I felt like we were 213. It's like we were boiling and like we're putting off a lot of steam, but it gave us an opportunity also to take a look in the mirror and say, hey, what could we do different? Like what could we be better at? And then once I got the temperatures, I told them, I said, hey, look, y'all type up what you think could be better on the job. If you don't want to say it out loud, let's type them up. You can print them off, put them in my top drawer. I will not be here Friday. Put them in my top drawer.
Purely anonymous.
Yeah, totally anonymous. Right. We only had 3 or 4 guys on the job, so it was. But they put them all there. I got to work that Monday, pulled them out, put them all on one list, and we sat down and we talked about it. We sat down and said, "Hey, look, I don't care who wrote this. I'm indifferent of who wrote it, but if we feel like this is an issue, how are we going to tackle it as a team?
Yeah.
How can we be better?" Right? And some of it was about communication. Some of it was about people getting to work on time. Some of it was about why are people texting me at 8 o'clock at night when I'm at home with my family and I don't want to be interrupted? Some of it was about, I don't like the email signature, or I don't like that this person sends passive aggressive emails, whatever it was. And so at the end of the process, we all looked at each other and said, "Hey, we kind of know who does these things, and it's kind of nice that now I know that bothers you, and let's work together to make it a better place and a better team atmosphere." And
it's a relationship, and sometimes it's something totally innocuous that I had no idea that bothered you so much, but I can fix that. So, one of the things you can do when you have these problems, you can sort the problems out into 3 different categories and say, okay, these are problems that each of us individually need to address in our own lives, and that's that awareness piece. The second thing some of these things are things we're just going to have to deal with. This is just the lay of the land here. And the third thing is things that the organization can help fix. So everybody has their personal responsibility. We have to accept reality, and then here's some things that we can shift within the community of the organization. But the very fact that you're willing to hear that feedback, that is so brave and so courageous, and it shows you care. And you asked a lot of questions, and the answers were questions too. You see how powerful all those questions are? But I mean, that's what builds the team.
Yeah, really.
Sure.
Yeah, it really does. And we ended up finishing that job. It was only about a year long, and we ended up doubling our bid fee. It was only like a $4 or $5 million job, and we killed the fatted calf. We made $800,000 on the deal.
That's great.
And all of us got fully bonused out. That was the time I bought my first pair of Lou Casey boots. I remember coming home with my boots, and my wife's like, "Oh wow, where'd you get those?" And I was like, "Hold up, let me show you the check that I got," because we're operating at 212, right? Yeah. We were probably operating about 160 when we had that meeting, but.
It takes the caring, it takes the courage, it takes those conversations that aren't always easy. I don't even specialize in the difficult conversations. I just specialize in conversation, period. And getting people to at least start. My goal is to get people talking to each other again, and to not do so with labels on themselves or labels on other, like, "Oh, but I'm so awkward. I'm just going to own the awkward." No, you don't have to own the awkward. You can fix the awkward. Right. It's not that hard. It can be done. And for some people, it's harder than for others. But just learning how to talk to each other in respectful ways and caring ways and courageous ways makes changes in an organization.
Yeah, and think about just the caring way, like the next time you're going to address somebody, whether it's good, bad news, good news. Yeah.
But always start. Here's another
news.
thing. I'm trying to get people to understand that we need to acknowledge each other in public. Like when I'm at the gym and I nearly bump into somebody someone's coming out of the locker room, I'm going in, and we can't pause to say, even if I don't know this person, it'd be great if we could say, "Oh, hello, good morning, excuse me," have some basic niceties where, "Hello, goodbye, please, thank you, I'm sorry, excuse me." Those things, calling people by name, if you know the name, that means so much. Our favorite word is our name. And when we can add those personal touches even into our everyday encounters with people we may never see again, or someone we see regularly, like I need to find out the name of my new dry cleaning lady. I'm sorry to say I don't know her name yet. I know the previous one. In fact, I know her really well, and I'm really sad that she left. I went through a grieving process on that because we both acknowledged and respected each other. So getting to know people, calling them by name is great. I know that your front desk person is Clarice.
Oh, there you go.
Because I asked her.
It sure is. Yeah, and she's going to remember you now, too.
I hope so.
Right. She didn't come in and say, "Your guest is here." She was like, "Miss Patty's here, and she's ready to get started." And it's like, oh, great. That's so good.
It makes us feel good.
Well, I think acknowledging also, that's a big thing, right? Because
calling someone by name before you give them the good news or the bad news. Yeah.
And I feel like there's a lack of acknowledgement also just in general. Like you said, whether it's at the gym, whether you're walking into a restaurant, whether you're walk into a room, you know, even if it's like at the doctor's office, like you walk in and there's literally 6 chairs there and 5 of them are taken, and you're like, well, I'm going to have to sit down and saying, hey, good afternoon. It's good to see you. Glad y'all are here, you know, or whatever it is. Maybe not glad you're here, but
hope everybody's okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, there's certain situations that get a little more awkward than others. But, you know, I've met some really cool people, you know, like I said, at coffee shops, standing in line. There's a gentleman that my boyfriend and I went to our favorite Italian restaurant, and there were the tables available, so we sat and ate at the bar. And the guy sitting next to us, we started talking to him. Turns out he is a touring musician. He has toured with all the bands you've heard of.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he goes to our gym now, so I see him every time I'm at the gym. He's there too. Hey, Bobby, how's it going? I try to be cool. I try not to get too, you know, excited when I see him. I try to be cool.
That is hilarious. But also, I think saying the goodbyes also, right? Sometimes it's people just want to walk out, and then you wonder, it's like, well, were they mad? What was going on?
Yes.
I can't believe they just left. And it's real easy to say, hey, goodbye, take care, thanks for having me.
Yeah.
I like that as well.
Yeah, hellos, goodbyes, please, thank you. A friend of mine traveled the world. He turned 50, sold all his belongings, and traveled the world. And he said he learned hello, goodbye, please, thank you in every language. He said he didn't have any problems with anybody. Everybody was very kind and gracious to him because he made the effort.
He was caring, right? He took that first step to be caring. Also, like what you said about assume the positive rapport, right? Even if it's going to be a tough conversation, there is a greeting that would allow you to, you know, kind of break the ice and talk a little bit, and then ease into kind of, hey, what the tough conversation is. But it's a practice. It's a choice, and it's a practice. Like I'm going to practice being more human, being more caring, being more acknowledging my fellow humans more. Again, this is about humanity. We're wired for this, and we've forgotten. I think we have. We really really have forgotten. We're too much to ourselves. We're too much to our phone. We're too much to our own agenda.
To our work, to the to-do list. And, you know, things have to get done. We have to make things happen. We have to pay the bills. We have to keep the company going. We have to keep our lives going. But if you just pause and spend 10 seconds, 30 seconds, 2 minutes talking to somebody, man, that makes the difference.
Yeah, it really would. And what does it take? What does it take, like 5 to 10 minutes a day or something like that? Because like you said, everybody's got something to do. Everybody's got their list they're trying to check off. Because as they check off the list, they feel good about themselves. They're ready to go to the next item. But working in your own silo on an $85 million job is not going to help anybody. Like, is there like a pointer or like a recommended daily allowance for interaction that's going to help grow the team? Or is there anything you could speak to that way?
I don't know the answer to that, but I do know that there's a statistic, U.S. Bureau of Statistics, is that most people spend less than 30 minutes a day talking to other people.
Oh, wow.
There's a lot of people that work alone. I don't know if I mentioned this already in this conversation, but, you know, Austin, which is where we are right now, is considered one of the top 20 loneliest cities in the country. And it's based on people working alone, eating alone, living alone. And we're spending a lot of time alone. And I think I work remotely. I've worked out of my own home office for years, but when I first started doing that, I knew that I had to get out at least several times a week, have lunches, have coffees, join some organizations, go to some networking meetings, get out. And it wasn't just looking for customers, it was just being with fellow humans, and it was also learning from my peers so that I could get better at what I did. So there's a lot of reasons. You know, it's the personal touch on things, it's sharing the knowledge, it's showing your people you care and building that culture. You know, there's a study called The Myth of the Lone Genius, and it proves that the most brilliant people over time were not the loners that we think they were. Like Beethoven, he was deaf and all this, a little bit nutty, but he did his great work, but he also spent a certain amount of time every day at the local pub where he could be with other people. And he had people come in to help him copy his music. And all these people, Edison, he was part of I forgot what they're called, the Vagabonds. He and Henry Ford, they took 2 or 3 weeks every summer, and they hopped in some of Henry Ford's cars, and they just took off and went on a road trip together for 2 weeks. And all they did was sit and talk about things, about industry and business and all of that. So it's learning, and it's creativity, and it's how innovation happens.
I'm a little disheartened to even hear that Austin is one of the loneliest cities.
I can't believe it.
I really can't either, because there's so many people that want to move here. There's so many great places to visit and live music and great food. It's all the more why we need to acknowledge people, why we need to speak to people, why we need to take time.
Yeah, invite them to lunch. Invite them. Some people aren't good at big things, so you need to do like, can we go have lunch? Would that be comfortable for you? Or could we do 4 people? I love 4 people for lunch, because if you're the shy one, you can just sit and listen.
Yeah.
And offer a few things here and there, so the pressure's off of you. Big events aren't everybody's thing, but it is a great way to make contacts, and it's a great way to learn. If there's a speaker or a program, it's a great way to learn. But, you know, introverts have to manage their energy. I know this because my introverted side is like, can we go now? Can we leave? Or my extroverted side is, we're just getting started here.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
I have these 2 personalities I'm dealing with. But, you know, not everybody is going to be super social. So it's the quality of those people. Who, you asked me a question earlier, and I'm not sure I answered it. The introverts like quality conversations. If you're going to have a conversation with an introvert, make sure it's a quality conversation. Extroverts can just be chatty all day long.
All
the more
day.
the better.
Right, absolutely. The one of the points that you just mentioned I wanted to come back to was the importance of listening. And you had mentioned that earlier, that maybe that's part of what makes a great conversation, is being able to listen. And what's a pointer for being able to listen? We talked a little bit about listening to understand or listening to respond. What is it about listening that really empowers other people or the person that's talking?
Well, I think we talked about that it's difficult, but we talked about how good it makes the other person feel. Okay, so those are 2 things to remember, but I have 3 things for you on that.
Okay.
One is the acronym WAIT, which stands for Why Am I Talking? Why am I talking? So people who tend to be chatty, and I'm one of them, I try to remember the WAIT acronym. Like, I will literally have to catch myself at times. And then there's another one, the 40-second rule. Speak for 40 seconds, which is like, say what you have to say in 40 seconds, which takes a little practice. And I would say, do this alone at home with your phone, and set the timer and answer a question, see if you can answer it in 40 seconds. You know, there are people that answer a question and they go all over the place before they get to the answer to the question.
Right.
So the 40-second rule is really good. And the other rule is 60-40. You should be listening at least 60% of the time in a one-on-one conversation. If it's a larger conversation, divide the conversation pie, which means if there are 4 people in a conversation, you speak only 25% of the time.
Oh my goodness.
And you have to listen 75% of the time. And just pay attention to how often that doesn't happen, where there's 1 or 2 people that are chatting, and the other 2 people are like, you know,
why am I even here?
Why am I here? I'm just, you know, going to eat my chili while everybody else is talking. An introvert won't mind that, though.
No, not at all.
Yeah. So those are some just tactics that you can try.
Yeah, I like the why am I.
Why am I talking?
Why am I talking? Right, and sometimes that can be frustrating, especially on a big construction team. You get into a meeting and somebody goes off on a tangent, and you're like, "Oh my gosh!"
You know, I think that's the fear thing. It's I think, like, when I'm on an airplane, I try to acknowledge my seatmates, but I also inside is like, "Oh, please don't be that person that's going to talk my ear off the entire time." So I pull out my book, my earbuds, because I don't want to talk unless it's someone super interesting, which I've had. Is it Rob Schneider? That's the music. I sat with his sound engineer.
Oh, really?
He's from up north where I'm from.
Wow.
We sat on a plane together, and I knew he was exhausted, so I only talked to him for a few minutes. But he was really interesting. But when I'm in an airplane and we're approaching, then sometimes I might start up a conversation because I know the time is only going to be so.
Yeah, we're getting ready to land. It's kind of like, hey, can you open the window and let's see where we are?
Yeah.
Oh, look, there's the St.
Is this
Louis
home
Archer.
for you?
Yeah.
Is this home for you, or are you traveling on business?
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Well, Patti, it's been awesome having you in today. It's been a great conversation. I've enjoyed having you. I've enjoyed some of the points I wrote down is about making the choice and what we're going to do this year, and how we can have better conversations, create better community to help our teams work better together. So thanks again for being here. It's been awesome, and wish
pleasure.
you a great and happy, prosperous 2024.
Amen to that. Same to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Been such a long